What is Maharam? So first of all, we're often asked about it. Maharam is a textile producing company founded by Louis Maharam, and we are incredibly grateful that they provide this funding to support this fellowship. They're committed to a fair and diverse creative world. This is the 14th year that we have been providing this funding, which is really exciting. And we have provided 130 fellowships and given out $650,000 to you to do these fellowships. So we have 2 more years. We have this cycle coming up and then 1 more cycle, and then we hope it will continue after that. So why pursue this? Why consider this? It really is a wonderful thing to get artists and designers out into the world. You cross disciplines, you work with people, you build community, you see and experience unique ways of thinking, and you get to use the skills also at times that you've developed at RISD. So lots of great stuff. What do you get? You get $5,000 as a stipend. This is focused on all undergrads except first year. So if you're first year here tonight, fantastic, and learn about it, but it'll be the next cycle that you'll apply to. But all other levels can apply. It supports an unpaid internship, and it has to be with a nonprofit, a government agency, or a non-governmental agency, but it cannot be a for-profit organization. That part is really important. Okay, and it is focused on getting artists and designers into environments, these government agencies and nonprofits, where they're not usually expected. So keep that in mind too. So if you find an organization that has a big, robust art staff, that may not be a competitive fellowship and could be problematic. And the focus of the fellowship is on social justice, building community, safeguarding our environment, sustainability, and climate change. So your fellowship has to be in those areas, which is very broad though, so keep that in mind. And you're going to see examples of that. Endless possibilities, open to all disciplines, which is great. This is so important. You know, when you find a project or work that you really care about in an organization you care about, now you can really give and be part of that organization. So keep that in mind. It can be anywhere in the world. And we've been in over 30 countries, which is fantastic, so keep that in mind too. It can help you build your own language, and the language of expressing your work, but also the language of these organizations, and provides you with skills that go beyond your classroom, right? And you get to explore how artists and designers can impact social issues and problems and all the things that these organizations are trying to help and solve and improve the world, which is really important. Okay, what isn't it? It's not your standard internship. So very rarely are you going to find this listed as an internship and then apply for it and make a fellowship. This is very much self-directed. You're going to build this, so keep that in mind as well. It's really important, and you already got a hint of this, that the organization isn't working with you exclusively to have you as a designer and artist. You have to really be engaged with the organization on multiple levels, and this isn't about kind of hiring a freelance artist and designer. That's really important. This should not fund your own project. So although your own work, and again, don't worry about this, your own work can be integrated into these experiences. It shouldn't be that you have a project, this is a way of you funding it, and then you find the organization. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And what it is, once again, it's an opportunity for you to contribute to an organization you really care about, that you have a voice in the organization. One thing that through the summer, you're going to be meeting with me in these check-in meetings. And one of the things I do ask often of the fellows is, you know, what roles do you have? Are you in meetings? Are you talking? Who's guiding you? Who's mentoring you? Now, this varies from organization to organization, but the most important thing is that you really want the organization to know that you, again, aren't just like a freelancer with them, that you're part of the organization. You're going to learn a lot from these organizations. One of the things that I think came up a lot in the reports from the fellows is often that many of these organizations work with a very small staff. They do so much to get by and do the great work that they do. And so when you're there, you're part of sometimes these smaller staffs making things happen. So you get to see how they work, how they survive, how they get through all the things they do. And this is, again, going to give you great experience. Almost every fellow I've ever known has put this on their resume, on their CV. They put it on their LinkedIn profile. And it gives you something really powerful to talk about when you're interviewing for other jobs and experiences. And you're going to have impact, which is awesome. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I want to show you some of the fellowships so you get a sense of the kind of experiences. I'm going to start with the first 5 that are fellows from this past summer and the summer before, because you're going to be hearing from them as panelists. So in order to do this, I was going back through their final reports, because when you do this, you have to do a final report. And there's so much great information that I'm going to read from these 5, and then I'm going to show you others more quickly, because there's so much important information here. So you get to see right here is Avery. Avery's right there, and Avery will be one of our panelists. And Avery worked with the Visiting Room Project in New Orleans, and this was a hybrid fellowship where you did some work from afar, but then got to go on site. I will say, and this is a note about this, the pandemic messed up everything, right? We still did the fellowship, but the fellowship was often remote. Sometimes hybrid. I would really emphasize that we would not want a remote fellowship. We would really prefer it to be on site, and we would prefer, if it is on site, that it could be hybrid, but we really do discourage a fully remote one unless there are unique circumstances. And we did have some unique circumstances even this past summer. Okay, so with Avery and the Visiting Room Project, this is a non-profit narrative archive and advocacy organization for prisoners facing life without parole in Louisiana. The interviews of this organization that they conduct provide documentation of a given person's life and are made available to their families and the communities. The interviews are also brought before the Louisiana Parole Board to aid in their release. The narratives are significant beyond individual advocacy and are also utilized to educate the public and inform policy decisions through educational events, cultural programming, and collaborations with other organizations around the U.S. Avery was involved in administrative and community meetings and saw firsthand how a small organization could have facilitated the release of 50 prisoners in Louisiana. Avery was responsible for planning, implementing, and creating documentation for a zine workshop, which is really fantastic, that reflected on girlhood with formerly incarcerated women and one transgender narrator through the organization. Avery included narrators in the planning process and documentation stages of the workshop, but also wanted to be sure that this aligned with the personal creative practice and reflected what the experiences that these women had had. This was really critical and really important in this process. So this work was involved in designing a trauma-informed narration handbook for narrators to have more agency over how and to whom they tell their stories of incarceration, finalizing a book based on the outcomes of the zine workshop, and conducting reflective interviews with the narrators. There was a lot involved here. And when you went down to Louisiana, you worked directly with these individuals, which was fantastic. Avery also had planned to create a community exhibition in New Orleans based on the zine workshop. So that gives you just one slice of one of the fellowships. We have Quillen here. Quillen is right there and will be one of our panelists. Quillen's foundation, I hope I pronounce it, is it the WAPA Foundation? WAPA. And this foundation is dedicated to the stewardship of WAPA, a 1,600-acre land division with a focus on community engagement, land restoration, and indigenous practices. Through stream restoration, invasive species removal, which you'll get to see some of those projects, and also educational youth summer programs, the organization strengthens both the land and the local community. Quillen played a role in three major areas. He assisted with the Foundation's youth programs, including data collection for grant reporting and creating forms to streamline the program tracking. He also contributed to Poi Day Initiative, a weekly food justice project that provided local families with affordable poi, a staple of indigenous Hawaiian cuisine. And additionally, he worked on a funded project of the U.S. Forest Service and the Trust for Public Land to design and build forest play elements from invasive species. So a couple of those areas that you're seeing in projects are from those invasive species. And that included the removal, too. Through attending staff meetings and collaborating with colleagues, he gained valuable insights into how the foundation operates and its interconnectedness with the community. One of the most impactful parts of his experience was seeing how the foundation works to foster a sense of stewardship while respecting and revitalizing indigenous practices. And that was a very important part of his fellowship. Next, we have Sophia. And so we have Sophia right here, and we were just chatting further. Sophia worked at the Congress of the Birds. And the Congress of the Birds, it's kind of really unique. It's Rhode Island's only avian-specific wildlife rehabilitation center. And they were founded in 2018 by Shada Soleimani. And she is an educator, activist, and multidisciplinary artist. The Center for the Congress of the Birds, is involved in rehabbing birds, and she began this as a child with her mom, a nurse and an Iranian political refugee, who took up rehabbing when they moved to the U.S. Before this past summer, this is incredible, the Congress of the Birds was in a basement in Providence. So it went from a basement in Providence to a 42-acre site in Chepachet, Rhode Island. And as we were just chatting, can you imagine there was a point where in the basement were 100 birds being rehabbed in Providence, and now you've got a 42-acre facility, which is just fantastic. So, and what was really cool in Sophia's case is Sophia has been there in this transition. So through this transition, you got to see them on the move, help them with the move, open a new facility, and with the new facility also have and address how they're communicating their accomplishments and really highlighting the great work, right, of this organization. Now, Sophia's background is illustration and studying illustration, so you were able to work on some of the communication efforts here, which is fantastic. You had just told me, too, and I have to say, one of the birds that just came in, which was highly unusual, was a puffin. And they not only rehabilitated the puffin, but brought it back to Maine because it was obviously off course. So the range of birds you encountered must have been beyond like thrilling and a delight. So you never know in these fellowships. You go into it with certain expectations, and then I think for so many of you, it even expands beyond that in the encounters that you have. This is a first for us. Tamai, let me do the next one, was also in Hawaii. So I don't know how it happened, but we ended up with 2 Maharam Fellowships in Hawaii. And you can see what's most critical is what your fellowship is about, not that 2 might be happening in the same place. You weren't on the same island, so that was one aspect. But they were different. So in Tanmi's case, could you pronounce the organization? Thank you. And this organization is Maui's Polynesian Voyaging Society. It is the second oldest of its kind and responsible for the revival of Polynesian navigation in Hawaii since the 1970s. It has recentered the canoe in island stewardship at material, spiritual, ecological levels and helped to bring the Hawaiian language back into the mainstream public life. In doing all of these things, it has brought forth a unique Polynesian navigational perspective which channels intergenerational, called Kilo, and this involves the atmosphere, the ocean, and the land. So you're navigating without instruments. You're using these observational components. The movement has become one of the strongest voices for the climate in the Pacific and for the world. Tami's role was helping participating in and documenting the various educational workshops held in partnership with other organizations in Maui and Kauai. She also helped sail Polynesian canoes. You can see her right there, which is fantastic, and got to witness how non-instrument navigation is undertaken and embodied through observational and structural practices. Tammy brought these perspectives into developing section and plan drawings that intersected landscape architectural representational methods and Polynesian worldviews. She also worked on understanding the effects of the Lahaina fires of 2023 on the island, merging knowledge from the community with members of Hawaii's GIS data. So a really fantastic experience. And Tammy also, in light of the political environment we in, had to jump through literally hoops of fire in order to make this happen, and it did happen. So this was a really special thing to accomplish after all you went through too. And then we also have as a panelist today Henry Ding. Is Henry here yet? I think Henry's going to come in 7:30. So Henry worked at the Archives, a nonprofit organization that obtains, maintains, and curates information on LGBTQ plus peoples on a national level. Henry conducted extensive research, which consisted of reviewing video documentation, analog digitization, reading, note-taking, field surveying, and oral history. All of this was part of his fellowship. Reading material consisted of sorting through hundreds of court transcripts, interview transcripts, books, letters, site plans, laws, magazines, and more. This research culminated in the curation of a new collection, which consists of a book set to be published on the Archives website, newly digitized materials, as well as a physical installation on the site. The curation included, Henry designed and he brought at the end of the summer this beautiful pamphlet that he made, showcasing, that's one of the aspects of the pamphlet that he created, which I think for the organization gave them a better visual way of talking about so much of the work they do. Because when you think about an archive, this is what Henry saw, these basements and areas filled with lots of boxes, lots of documentation. How do you make that vital to people so they get really engaged with the organization? And that's the perspective that Henry was coming from. So you're going to hear more from Henry when he arrives for the panel part. Now, I wanted to show you a couple more examples of what's taken place. Graciela Batista from Illustration worked at 826 LA in Los Angeles, and her work was involved in writing. So she had very little visual work in the summer. She worked with various youth in Los Angeles to improve their writing skills, incorporating some visual elements maybe in their writing, but it was really a writing workshop. She has also worked with the Writing Center at RISD prior to the fellowship. Viola had a really terrific fellowship with the Mayor's Housing Innovation Lab in Boston. And with that lab, one of the things this summer that Viola did this is they were working on a lot of modular housing and how to incorporate modular housing as an element in housing issues in Boston. Oh, and another thing too, when you're involved in the fellowship, you were sailing. Viola, seeing a city from the water is an important thing. So Viola got out on the water. So there are lots of different activities. I know for you, Quillen, you got to see a tsunami approach the island because this was the point of the tsunami, which was not only exciting and probably scary, but you also had to move tons of equipment. So there are actions that happen in the course of the summer. You were in the midst of the tsunami as well, right? So, you never know what will happen. Sam worked locally, so your fellowship can also be local. He worked with What Cheer Flower Farm right in Providence. They also, like other organizations, were moving to a bigger facility, and he got to work on elements to bring attention to their organization. Uni, this was a really cool one, worked with the lighting detectives in Hamburg, Germany. This fellowship involved the role of lighting in cities and how it impacts the environment, how it impacts people, how it impacts animals and other creatures. And she did a lot of research, but she also did drawings every day, these gorgeous drawings that were based on the lighting experiences that she was seeing. Aya had a really terrific fellowship that involved with the anti-racist movement. It's kafala, and it's about immigrants who work in Lebanon, but in almost an indentured servitude. And there are really terrible things that happened to these individuals. So they were doing a lot of studying and research of this. And she was developing an exhibit to tell the story of these workers who are often mistreated in the kafala system. Anya, this was another really powerful one, worked with Chintan Environmental Research, and they were focused on working especially with families and youth who are the trash pickers, who go through massive amounts of trash. And part of it is educating the youth, but also figuring out how to use the trash in ways that could be, items that could be sold or marketed. In the case of the children, they often were developing little almost engineering projects using scrap, cardboard, and other materials. But the power of the organization is to improve the lives of these children and families. Chensi, this was another wonderful one, was a ceramicist at RISD and went into areas of China where there are these deep traditions of working with local clay, families that have been involved for centuries in making these ceramics, and then also groups that have had political conflict as well with the government, and had just a fabulous fellowship. And then Derek, in a similar way, has been based in Ecuador and worked with bamboo as an element to develop shelter, especially in emergency situations and flooding, and to also help communities and people. What's really interesting with Derek is that Derek is, I think till recently, still in Ecuador, because Derek went from this fellowship and then got a Fulbright. So many things happen with the fellowship where you can often transition to grad school. We've had people go on to PhDs, and then others, of course, who've done the Fulbright and other grants as well. And bringing this kind of full circle to Avery, this was back in 2017. So in the course of the fellowship, we had another fellowship really focused on working and improving the lives of prisoners, which was Books to Prisoners. And Bowen did a really incredible project, similar to Henry, in documenting the work in archives, but also working with the organization to get these books to prisoners. This work also led to a talk that she did at Design Indaba in South Africa that was related to the fellowship. And then I'm concluding with one of the most unique fellowships that we've ever had among the Maharam. Hannah Garrett, who went by Hannah Susanna. Hannah was and has been really focused on death and passing, and especially when you, in burials, especially in the United States, use chemicals and formaldehydes that then could leach into the environment and impact. So she researched and found Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery, which is all natural burials. Now, what happened, this was in the midst of the pandemic, and it just had to be hybrid, or remote. But at the very end, she was allowed to go down to the cemetery, participate in digging the graves, and participate and see firsthand the really important work of having these environmentally sensitive burials. And it was just really an incredible experience. We did Zoom meetings, and this organization tries to bring a lot of attention to how many chemicals, again, are used in the funerary systems, which was incredible. So there are many more, but does that give you a better sense of the kind of variety and just the magnificent work of the fellowship? Okay, great. Now, Lisa Kramer is going to come up and tell you how to apply, and then we'll continue on.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm RISD Careers Grants and Residency Manager and Fulbright Program Advisor. Let's see. So, first, we're going to go over where everything is found. So all the resources are on the RISD Careers website. If you go to Artist Resources, Grants and Awards, and then RISD Managed Grants. And right at the top is the Maharam Fellowship. And there are 3 links that are really important there. There is the guidelines, the Fellows website, and the application. So first, just a quick look at the Fellows website, because this is the exciting part. All our fellows are on here, so you can read a project summary of every single one of our past fellows since 2012. And you can also click on Follow the Fellows, and that's where you can get to a blog where you can read around about what actually happened during some of their summer experiences. If you go back to resources, you can click on the guidelines, and that will take you to this very extensive document. Everything you need to know is in this document, including a selection criteria. And it is really important that you review this now to help you find the right internship that fits this criteria. And then review this as you work through the process to develop your proposal and to really stay on track. And then review it at the end as a checklist to finalize, to address all the important points to make your case. Detailed information on each one of the application components is found in the guidelines. These are the essay questions. Don't let the number of these questions scare you. They are actually here to help you. Use these questions to develop your internship. What do you want to do and why? A thoughtful, feasible, clear plan is important. Keep in mind that a goal without a plan is just a wish. This is a grant writing educational opportunity, so no matter how far you go in this process, you're going to learn a lot. You will upload an internship offer letter. This is from the organization. It should be on their letterhead. It should be signed and include their contact information. Details are helpful in this letter to understand the structure, the resources, and what you intend to do. But also, flexibility and openness is important because there will be, and there should be, as you heard from Kevin and you will hear from our fellows, that there are going to be some unknowns. Enthusiasm and support for the internship staff help speak to feasibility. The other application components are uploading your resume, an unofficial transcript, and one letter of recommendation. Going back to the resources, this is where you get to the online application, which looks like this. And this is basically a straightforward form type application that directly follows the guidelines. You can't save this form and come back to it, so you're going to develop your responses offline and then copy and paste and upload your attachments when you are ready. And be ready, because this is not a last-minute grant, and that's why you are here tonight, 2-3 months in advance, and late applications are not accepted. So there's 3 initial frequently asked questions. What is most important to the jurors? And it depends. There is no formula for this. Your proposal is unique to you and your interests in your internship, and outside factors include the pool of applicants, past internships, and what's going on in the world. Is this internship a Maharam fit? It depends. You have to make your case. There are a few rules, as Kevin was talking about. It can't be for a for-profit company, it must be unpaid, and it should be an internship where artists and designers are not usually found or where artists and designers are contributing in a meaningful way. And then the rest is really up to you. How are you advancing social justice, safeguarding the environment, or both? How are you growing your non-art and design skills? And what is the impact? How will this experience impact you? How will it impact this organization that you care about? And how will you have an impact as an artist and designer in the world? And the last question at this stage is always, how and when do I start? So now is the time where you are getting organized and you're going to develop a timeline for you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Scott to do the timeline.
All right. So my name is Scott Malloy. I'm a senior career advisor at the Career Center. I work with Kevin and Lisa to support and help coordinate the fellowship, primarily through offering advising to prospective applicants. So if you apply, certainly keep my name in mind, and I'm happy to work with you as you develop the proposal and as you work through the application. To that point, let's talk through the timeline and what that looks like so that you can stay on track as you work towards submitting. I do have to say, you can probably tell I'm coming off of a cold, so my voice is a little hoarse, but I'll do my best to kind of struggle through this, and hopefully you can hear me, but the mic sounds like it's picking up my voice pretty well. So we are basically here in the November to December range, and this period of the timeline is really an exploration and outreach section of your preparation for applications. So Lisa just talked about the guidelines. If you have not reviewed them yet, make sure that you go online and do that, because that's going to be your roadmap for how to successfully apply. You can find that on our website at that link that that just popped up. You also can, as we shared, review the internship experiences of past fellows to get inspiration and see what might be possible. While, of course, you wouldn't want to duplicate a past experience, it is good to kind of see what others have done, as Kevin was sharing before. That's also on the Maharam Fellows website. You can meet with us to get guidance on your proposal, get feedback on your ideas. We're there to help you and support you, and of course we sort of have the kind of institutional knowledge and history of seeing what has been done before, and so we might be able to provide some feedback as you work through it. This is really important. You do need to start researching at this stage organizations that could be your host internship site and that match your interests and the type of thing that you want to be doing in the fellowship. I'm going to include a list of 3 resources right now that you might want to check out if you've never used before. So Idealist is a really good way to find organizations, mainly nonprofit organizations, that work in either the community or social justice space, so a good fit for this fellowship. Climate Base, also an online resource where you can search globally for all kinds of environmental and sustainability focused organizations. So if your interests are more in the kind of climate and sustainability aspect of this fellowship, that's a good one to tap into. And then on the government side of things, at least based in the States, USA.gov does have a full listing, kind of A to Z index of all different government agencies, and an easy way for you to kind of explore what might be possible in terms of affiliating with a government agency. So those are 3 resources. They're not the only 3, but those are 3 that you might want to start with, and then there's certainly other ways to continue to explore places. Beyond that type of research, you also want to be taking this time to craft your learning goals. So think about essentially like learning outcomes that you want to have for the internship experience, and also maybe a summary of skills that you could contribute or bring to the internship host site. So it's kind of thinking about this in terms of like, what do I want to get out of this, or what do I want to learn from this experience, and also what can I bring and contribute, and that will be helpful, as it says, to be able to present that in conversations with your potential internship host. And also just helpful as you write your essays and such as you move through this. Another thing that you want to do, especially once you kind of have done that research and you've sort of crafted those learning goals and kind of have an understanding of the skills you can pitch, you'd want to start that initial outreach to organizations so you can begin those conversations about creating an internship within their structure. This is a time where you're going to develop an understanding of their unique needs, which is really something you can only do through conversation with them. And also, as we were talking about those learning goals, you're able to share, what you want to get out of the experience. So these conversations are a critical part of the proposal development process. And then also, just be sure to, talk with Student Financial Services to discuss the impact of this award on your financial aid package. If applicable to you, if you receive financial aid, you may want to consult with Student Financial Services to see if this receiving this award would impact you in any way moving forward. As we move into January, into the new year, you're really moving into a writing and development phase of the process. So while you're continuing conversations with prospective host organizations and really kind of fine-tuning and honing in on what the internship could look like, you also want to be now starting this process of drafting responses to the application essay questions that can be found in the guidelines, can be found in the application that Lisa was referring to before. As you're writing those essay responses, you want to keep in mind the way that the committee who's selecting the fellows will be evaluating applicants, right? And this is, to be clear, this is stuff that's all in the guidelines, so you don't have to commit this to memory right now. But as a reinforcement, those selection criteria are student readiness for the experience. Are you ready to do this type of experience? Is the internship site that you've selected a good fit for the Maharam Fellowship? Is what you're proposing feasible within a 8 to 12 week time frame for an internship? And what are the impacts and outcomes of the experience, both for you personally, academically, professionally, but also broader impacts for the organization or even for these issues of social justice and sustainability. Excuse me. You also, at this stage, would want to find a professor or a past supervisor at a past work position or job that you've had that would be willing to write a recommendation letter on your behalf. And as part of that process, you would want to make sure that you're providing them with a deadline so that they can be submitting that letter on time. The details of the fellowship, so this is where like the guidelines are really useful to you, as well as potentially even the website with some past fellows so they can get an understanding of the history of the fellowship, and also just the basic elements, the kind of like bullet points of what you are proposing uniquely for your fellowship. This is another area where you may want to continue to be meeting with us to gain feedback on those draft essay responses, as well as other components like the budget and the timeline. And then you also could look beyond our office too and meet with tutors from the Center for Arts for Language and get further advice and feedback on your writing. Okay, now we get into February, and this is sort of like game time. So February is where you are finalizing everything and doing your final submission. So a couple key pointers here. You want to confirm with your recommender that they will be submitting that recommendation letter on time, and that needs to be emailed to Lisa by 12 p.m. on February 19th, which is the submission date, the due date, the deadline. You, of course, want to be finalizing all of your essays, finalizing the expense budget that you have to submit, the timeline that you have to submit, and any other application materials that are included. The following two things are kind of recommended advice that we have. So we recommend that you have a verbal internship offer from your host organization no later than February 5th. Ideally, you'd have it before this, but certainly no later than February 5th so that you can move forward with confidence that this thing is a sure thing and you have a sure offer. And then we also recommend that you have a written internship offer letter from the host organization, no later than February 12th. So you have that well in advance, at least a week in advance before the final submission, which is everything must be done and submitted online by 12 p.m. on February 19th. Cool? Cool. Lisa mentioned this, but we will reiterate it. We will not accept late or incomplete applications, so this is a very hard deadline. So, you've gotten to this point. You've submitted. Awesome. What happens next? So this is really like a selection and acceptance phase. So between March and April, what happens is an applicant, all applicants, will be notified of the selection committee's decision by mid-March. So you will know one way or another whether you receive the fellowship by mid-March. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. Accepted fellows will then sign a grant agreement and provide their promotional materials to us by early April. So when we talk about promotional materials, what you see on the website in terms of a bio, in terms of a headshot, things like that, that's what we're talking about. When we reference promotional materials, you have to supply that to us by early April so that we can start to tout and promote you as fellows and tell the world about the awesome stuff that you're going to be doing. You then also attend a kind of communal Maharam kickoff dinner or an orientation dinner in mid-April where you get to meet all the other fellows, which is really cool. And we also sort of like give you tips and advice on how to navigate the experience as effectively as possible so that you can go forth into the summer with confidence. For international students, international student fellows, you also need to consult with RISD's ISSA office regarding any necessary work authorization paperwork that you may need in order to, legally do the work experience, do the internship experience. Fellows, fellows wishing to receive academic credit for the fellowship experience, for the fellowship internship, also should talk to their academic department and ensure that they will support you and be able to sponsor that credit. As we move into May and June, we're now in a registration and you getting the money phase, which is a cool phase. So one thing that does have to happen before you receive the money is that you do have to register your internship in RISD Artworks as part of the internship registration system that happens at RISD by the summer internship registration deadline, which is June 12th. And that has to happen regardless of whether you are trying to receive academic credit for the internship experience or not. You have to register it either way. This is a non-negotiable thing, so you will not receive the funding until you do this, so just keep that in mind. And once you've finished all those steps, once you've done the registration and you've given us the promotional materials and all of those things, You then, at that point, are able to receive the funding, the $5,000, and it is your responsibility as the fellow. So you receive all that money up front, and so then it's your responsibility to manage and budget that money as appropriate and as needed. So just so you know that it's not given in installments or anything like that. So we're getting to the tail end here. So June and August now, this is the fun part. You actually do the fellowship. You do the internship experience. So you're off and running, you're exploring, you're doing the thing you proposed to do, and it's all coming together. A couple quick notes here. Fellows do have to have 3 check-in meetings with Kevin Jankowski. You don't have to do it. You get to do it. It's an honor and a pleasure. And it's actually, in all seriousness, it's a really important thing. And I think the other fellows, the past fellows, will talk about how it's a really useful check-in as you go through the process to be able to talk about the experience and get feedback and navigate challenges as they come up. And that, so while it is a mandatory thing, I think it's also a really helpful thing that fellows have appreciated in the past. You also want to take care to document the experience carefully, take careful notes. This is important on many levels, but it's definitely important in terms of being able to write a final report. That is also another mandatory thing as part of the fellowship. So being able to take notes and kind of document your experience as you go will help you when it comes time to write that final report. And also it will help you for this other step, which is as part of the fellowship, you're also required to create 4 blog posts that are documenting your fellowship experience. That is also on the fellowship website that we referenced before, which you can all look at if you want to look at examples of these past blog posts. They're pretty straightforward, so that's the link, by the way. But these posts are really usually just a mix of kind of narrative texts that are describing what you're doing in the fellowship, along with kind of visual documentation like photos or videos of the experience. So moral of the story here is careful documentation of the experience is going to be helpful to you on multiple levels, whether it's the final report or the blog posts that you have to do. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is the kind of final thing is in September, you've wrapped up the fellowship, you're done, and really the only thing, that remains is the submission of that final narrative report that does get shared with Maharam. And, Kevin may talk about this more, but really important because it's also a part of the justification for how we, can say like this is really valuable work that you're doing and that they should continue to fund this type of thing so that RISD students can continue to have these types of amazing experiences. So it is actually a very, very important part of the process. So with that said, parting thoughts. So where you are now, again, kind of back to the beginning of the timeline, we're in November, it's the initial stages, it's kind of all in front of you. What can you start doing now? Consider starting to have conversations with advisors, whether it's us in the Career Center or faculty that you're close with, to talk about your goals and ask for advice in terms of building the fellowship and designing a proposal. Then start exploring and finding organizations that could potentially be really ideal host internship sites that align with your passions and interests and the types of things you want to be doing creatively. And then start just kind of free writing. Start writing about your interests, start writing about those organizations, the concepts, types of problems you want to explore, the questions that are kind of driving your thinking. So the idea behind this is that this free writing will, what you do in this process may find its way into the essays eventually and may help with that essay development process later on. So it's sort of like a brainstorming type of a thing. So you can do all of those things now starting in November and moving into December, and it'll set you up really well for being on track to submit come February. So that is the timeline, and now we get to the really, really fun part, which is hearing from the past fellows. So with that, I'll leave you, and I think we'll call up the fellows to the podium.
Let's move they've seen your pictures and probably can match you pretty well, but why don't we just go down and if you can state who you are, your department, your graduation year, and then we'll field questions right after that. So it's good for them to just get to know you right now. So we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Tanmay, and I was in one of the Hawaii internships. I was working at Hui Oa'a Kaulua, and I'm wearing their jersey. And I graduated from landscape architecture, the master's program, last May, and I'm still around at RISD as a teaching fellow.
I'm Quillen, and I'm a junior in ID, and yeah, Hi, I'm Henry. I'm a fifth year in architecture. I did work with the Archives nonprofit in Toronto, like so many years ago now.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a senior in the illustration department, and I worked with Congress of the Birds this past summer.
I'm Avery. I am in my thesis year, my second year of the graphic design MFA, and I worked with the Visiting Room Project.
Okay, so questions from all of you. Anything pop in your head right now?
Can I ask how you guys found the organizations that you wanted to work with?
I can start. I had a connection with the program manager of this organization, just like through knowing one another where we used to live in Indiana. And we both had like moved away. And so I saw that as like a really interesting opportunity that I wanted to get involved in.
Yeah, I actually found the internship before I even considered applying for Maharam. Like Congress of the Birds is in Providence, so I had like heard about it locally, and I had like had some friends who had brought birds in there. And then I had this class assignment where I had to interview a person of interest, and I happened to know, or like I found a staff member of the organization, and I interviewed them, and I did this project and sent them the project after I finished it just to be like, thanks so much. And then they offered me to be able to work with them this summer, and then I went about Maharam after that.
I found them through the Maharam process. I knew I wanted to do something back home with something to do with like youth, queer community and architecture. So I just Googled a lot and I was like, hey, like who wants me? But I like had like a couple places actually. I remember the place I eventually worked at, it was them in another nonprofit that I also was talking to their director at the time. But because nonprofits are always like a crazy environment, that one just fell through. And the archives kind of just happened from there.
I had actually interned on island the year prior, and it was sort of a connection that I actually made in high school, and that carried, and that I kind of stayed in contact with, and I guess, yeah, a year prior I had done some work with a completely different organization on island, and I had some contact with the YPAW Foundation, and then sort of around this time I started reaching out to people that I knew, and when I heard about the Maharam Fellowship.
I have a longer answer, which is that I had been like deeply interested in the work, the broader like work that my organization was doing. I had no idea that they actually existed. I tried to contact, and I didn't know anybody in Hawaii at that point, and then I tried to contact the parent organization. I think it must have been like 30 emails over many months. And then like I just wasn't hearing back, which makes sense now to me because I know what their work is like. And then I asked, friends and professors for help, people who might know people in Hawaii, and like just a lot of like, second, third, fourth contacts. And then I found an organization that picked up my call, which was, when that happened, I was blown away because there was a real person across on the other side. And then once they picked up my call, and then like they didn't respond to any of my emails still. And the call was like really enthusiastic. They were like, yeah, that sounds interesting. And then I just called them again and again and again. And eventually they picked up and they were like, okay, let's do this Zoom call. And I would say like once I had them on the Zoom call, they were actually really enthusiastic about it. But yeah, I think like just politely reaching out and saying like that this is something that you want to do. And as long as, I think in my case, like they always seemed excited. They just seemed really busy to like respond and be like, yeah, you can come on whatever dates. So as long as like they're not, brushing you off, I think it's worth pursuing it.
Yeah, and an important element for all of you to keep in mind, many organizations, especially nonprofits, are very concerned with how they're going to fund you or pay you. And so one of the things you can introduce yourself through email or call is to tell them that if I receive this fellowship, I'll have $5,000 of support. And I know many fellows over the years, that's been like one of the things that's really helped to grab their attention and have them get back to you, because that is a concern for all of them, and then when they hear that, they feel better about how to proceed. So keep that in mind. In the midst of all the work that one does at RISD and all the time that you take, why, for the 5 of you, why is it important to do this fellowship and move this kind of work beyond the classroom in your experiences? Like, why did this matter to you to do this?
I can start by just saying, just like you were saying, Kevin, I think when we're here, we get very much into this RISD bubble and this really sort of closed off mindset, especially when we're, working on projects that can be hard to visualize actually in the real world, or they seem so RISD centric. So to me, it was just really important to sort of, especially as an illustrator, somebody who communicates so directly with the general public all the time, to see how my work could impact the wider world, even if that wider world was just locally in Providence and affecting the local wildlife. But just to be able to take myself out of the classroom and also learn something new, learn something that is not studio related at all in a field that I would never have been exposed to before.
For me, I knew that I wanted the opportunity to really get involved in some kind of social justice, community-oriented project, and it feels very difficult with the pace of courses and studio, and also just moving here, not being that involved in Providence communities. And so for me, it was a really nice opportunity to, have this material that I'm continuing to develop in my studio and will include in my thesis book and things. And so, I think if you're looking for engagement beyond the classroom and find it really difficult, it's a really great opportunity to get a lot of things to work with.
I did, the summer I did the Maharam, I had a pretty negative relationship with architecture. I was kind of over it. And I think it kind of helped to apply that in a real world basis. It's kind of humbling to have to justify your presence in this organization of people who you've kind of just inserted yourself into. And to sort of try to offer parts of your skill set that you think would benefit them. It necessitates some sort of it necessitates compromise, but in a really fulfilling way. And I think just also being able to mash up your discipline and taking it outside of the RISD bubble and mashing it into whatever organization you've entered into is a really fun experience. And I think my Maharam is honestly pretty central to my thesis now. My thesis project, and a lot of the people I met were really central to that, and none of that would have happened. And it's not even something I would have predicted when I started my Maharam, too. So it's the sort of ability to be surprised, I think, for me was a really rewarding aspect of the Maharam.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone else has said. I think that it's really exciting to get to actually go into the real world and practice sort of the skills that we learn here actually out in the real world. And also I think that this is usually most successful if you're doing something that you're passionate about. So pursuing a passion beyond art and design, or something that's kind of intermixed with that. is a really exciting opportunity. And I think that it I agree that it really motivated me and also allowed me to sort of think about what I want to do after school in a more grounded and realistic way, rather than just kind of freaking out about not having a job, but knowing that like there are places for us, and yeah.
So I think I might be the only person who did it after graduating, like on the panel.
In this panel.
In this panel. Yeah, and I think like for me, it was important to do the Maharam because with the organization I did it with, because I studied landscape architecture at RISD, and it's landscape architecture within like a terrestrial space, and it's like your relationship to it is through essentially like as a designer, as sometimes as a lot of it is a process, a lot of it is a service. And I think like I felt like the highest ideals of my field was being represented in the way that these communities that I was working with like navigated the ocean without having a map, without having a compass in the Western sense, and like being able to sort of be in the environment in this really embodied way, and like think about measurement in a way that's like out in the ocean, that relates in a way that relates to the human body, to the constellations, to like the winds, and like have a name for different kinds of winds, have a name for different kinds of like ocean currents, and like have a relationship to like the world in this way that, like I said, was like really representative of like what to me the essence of like landscape architecture was. And I think you really just have to be out in the ocean sailing and being there and like seeing how that lives in that world. And so yeah, I think that's clearly not something you can do at RISD. But I would say like the skills that like you're able to like bring to that point where it's like you're using your skills by like design, you're trained as somebody who's providing a service sometimes. And I think it's like those communities need it the most because they have to articulate this like point of view that really lives outside of industrial life sometimes. And increasingly like it's like that perspective at the forefront of climate change, at the forefront of like social justice, and like where they really need, I think, it's like that's where like a really fruitful collaboration could happen in terms of like how does design stand up for these like places. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say too, the impact of the fellowship on the fellows is almost always fantastic, but the impact on the organization and how they feel about you being there, I've heard so many organizations just like, this was incredible, or we saw things in a new way, and this was amazing. And one of the ones years ago, one of the directors of this organization called me and just said, I got to tell you, when we entered this fellowship, I didn't know what this fellowship was going to do, and I didn't know what an artist and designer would do. And I swear this is a true story. They were like, the experience we had brought such insight, having someone from an art and design school, and the cliche, I would just want to clone this person and have them on, have more of them on my staff. What a flip to go from, I'm not sure what this is about, and yeah, maybe we'll do it, to like, oh my goodness, this is what art and design can do. So, your art and design thinking, whether you're doing something directly visual or just the way you perceive the world, is really important in this. So, other questions? Yeah.
Please feel free to skip this question if you don't want to answer, but I'm wondering how long exactly each of your experiences was, and what did you use the grant to support during your experience? Was it flights to and from the location, rent, food, or did you also have other jobs that you used to help support you in this experience?
Mm-hmm.
I can go. So the grant was entirely for my flights, stay, groceries. And yeah, for me, like doing an internship in Hawaii is incredibly expensive. So I think I had just like 4 things on my budget, which covered the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky to know people where I was doing my internship, but yeah, the cost of living is really high in Hawaii, but also just everywhere. So it was flights. I had a truck when I was there, and then it was just food, and I was able to stay with people, so housing was a little bit lower, but that basically took me through all of the money.
And sorry, mine was 9 weeks because I had to I couldn't afford to live there for 3 months, so it was, yeah.
I was pretty fortunate with I did my fellowship back home in Toronto, so living costs with at least housing was fine. I'm in a financial situation where I have to partially support myself, so it also kind of acted as just a supplement for a job that I would have had to have gotten that summer anyways. So just food and transportation across the city and just the expenses of life were things that were covered. There are some things like exhibition costs and printing, but I'd say it was just it gave it, at least mentally, emotionally, what it provided was kind of like a break from stress, from financial stress, and like a period of time where I could very purely focus on the fellowship. Yeah, and I did 8 weeks also. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was, luckily I didn't have to purchase any flights because it was here in Providence. Yeah, expenses went towards rent and groceries and transportation. And then because I was here, I was also able to be an online TA and work at admissions, which is what I do throughout the school year too, which helped supplement that as well. And yeah, my internship was 8 weeks long, but then because I was here also for the month of August, I was continuing to work with them throughout then.
Yeah, I think mine was maybe about 10 weeks, and is still ongoing collaboration with them, voluntarily outside of the Maharam, which is very important. And yeah, I used it for covering my rent. Also, it was hybrid, so I did spend 2 weeks in New Orleans, and that covered me traveling there and my cost of stay there, but also supporting paying my rent here in Providence as I'm working this, food, just those daily living expenses were part of my budget.
One thing with the fellowship too, you get the $5,000 as Scott had said. There's no tracking. You're not providing receipts or other things, so you don't have to do that. But, and this is important, budget is part of it. So when you do the application, the organization wants to know that the funds, how are you applying the funds? Are they to travel costs? Are they to rent? Are they to other, food and just getting by? That's what you would do in any internship. So do keep in mind that the budget is very important, but a good part of this fellowship is you don't have to, provide a kind of a rundown of your expenses after the fact. Okay. Another question. Yeah. Okay.
I think it was mentioned earlier that when you're at an institution, there's that feeling of having to prove to the institution that it's worth having you there. Mm-hmm. And I remembered in the application process, it was mentioned that you write what you think you have to offer to that institution. And I was wondering what you guys wrote or what you think you offered to that institution through the internship process.
Okay, great question.
Yeah, I think when you're going through the application process, I got a lot of help from the people I was going to be working with, where we brainstormed ideas and they had a good sense of my skills, and then I got a sense of what they're looking for. So I think there was definitely a good amount of shared understanding. When I got there, like Kevin was saying earlier, working with small nonprofits, there's so many things that you're dealing with, taking care of the place, everything, doing an energy audit, everything from the energy, the bills to cleaning and painting the office to organizing the stuff. So I think my first few weeks I just leaned into whatever needed to be done. And a lot of that was and because my organization also had a voyaging canoe, a lot of that was just the labor of maintaining an office and, sailing a canoe and which involved all kinds of tasks. It was cleaning, loading, unloading, preparing things, yeah. And I think I had I think they appreciated leaning, my being able to lean into that and just being flexible with the work that you're able to offer. It doesn't mean you have to do every single thing, because I think there is also flexibility to not being on somebody's payroll in a very specific way. But yeah, I think like what really worked was to just like lean into that as much as possible, so that they knew that they could like trust me with like the decisions that I would make like further down the line about like, you know, maybe things that I wanted to explore, or like maybe time that I wanted to spend on doing certain things. So I think that relationship really matters, and I think that's also points to like having partners that you can like have that, you know, kind of a conversation with throughout the application and the internship.
Yeah, I would say that my fellowship was similar. Like, you kind of sort of start, you offer, I mean, for me specifically, it was like a, you know, environmental, like land stewardship organization. So I was offering physical labor, and that was sort of a big, I guess, my entry. But then also in that application, you are alluding to like your art and design skills as well. And I think that organizations will definitely, as you sort of prove yourself and as you sort of, they get comfortable with you, I found myself being sort of like trusted with more tasks geared in that direction a little bit. And I think that was really rewarding. So I would say that even though it's not the main focus, and you definitely will gain a lot of, you know, experience outside of art and design related tasks, it definitely is something that, you know, organizations really value and will definitely want to, you know, utilize your skills in some way.
Yeah, I do think it's important, like, in the application process to be, like, confident with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think the time to be humble is when you're applying. And that's important for, like, getting them to even, like, agree to have you. It's like you're excited about your project. You are confident about it. You have these abilities. Mm-hmm. I think it's okay to kind of be wishful about it, as long as they're excited with you. For me, I got there, and then day one, I was like really stressed. I was like, okay, what's my game plan? And then I was talking to the director, and she was like, actually, I think that you should just like sit down and research for like a while. And I was like, okay, great. So my first few weeks were actually way different than I thought they would be. I was working at like, it was like a queer histories archive. So it's like this giant library. They had like hundreds of thousands of files in offsite storage that I also had to visit all the time. And so a lot of my first few weeks were just like research, reading, talking to people there. It's also like these are these people's like whole careers. There's like so much to learn from them. Archival studies is kind of crazy, actually. Like, I had to like learn a whole kind of language instead of vocabulary. Meet people, talk to people. My initial sort of plan was to do like an exhibition or an installation with the archive, but it kind of morphed into doing a book and sort of online exhibition with them on the topic of queer architecture. And that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't open to being flexible once I got there. And their openness, which I'm really grateful for, to sort of also teaching me, learning with me, having conversations together, and being flexible together. And then I think being able to like go talk to each other, talk to whoever you're working with, like throughout your fellowship, and then saying, hey, like, this is what I'm thinking. I just like think having like those clear lines of communication, like establishing a good rapport, is super important.
Yeah, similar to what people have said, but likewise for many of these people, my organization was very small. They have literally 3 full-time staff members, and they're completely run by volunteers otherwise. So just like the initial benefit, I think, that they expressed to me of me being there was like a set of hands that is there every single day, but also has the bandwidth to sort of like think beyond the logistical things that were going on. Like, you know, our director would get a phone call every 5 minutes about an injured bird and have to go run off and do that. And we were transporting everything from Providence to Chepachet. So it's really chaotic at a lot of nonprofit organizations. And to have somebody, an outside set of eyes, to, especially somebody with art and design background, but also just somebody to like help out wherever is needed, but then also be able to like think and reflect and like step back and be like, oh, where can I be of help here. Like, I think that was really important, like, to be flexible going in. Like, I spent the first 4 weeks just sort of getting integrated into what they do on a day-to-day basis and figuring out where my skills would be best applied. And yeah.
I'll say to this question too, of like how you talk about what you offer the organization in an application. Something that was really helpful for me was that I had numerous calls with the organization, with like the director and some other folks, but also with Kennedy, who was my supervisor for this Maharam. Kennedy and I had talked numerous times also. And so the fact that I was able to do that well before turning in my application, I got more insight into the organization and could be more specific on the application. And so we knew we wanted to address that, the women, because of some sensitive content within their narratives that they had in this archive, were not being as visible as like the men's archive. So like that's a thing that I can address as someone who's a designer, and we can, do these skill shares and give these people the opportunity to talk about themselves. So I think that was like a design specific thing that I could offer to kind of like address this like issue within the organization.
So relating to the application and that question related to it, for each of you, what's a tip from you for a successful application? Like, of course, there could be 5 tips, but what is one tip from each of you that would help everyone attending make a good application from your perspective?
I think being specific about how, you can like help this organization grow, but also yourself and like the things like concretely that you will benefit from within this fellowship.
I think also like showing your curiosity about the organization through your application too, like asking, sort of identifying like the core questions that you're going into this internship with, and how you plan on sort of working through those.
Yeah, it's been a second since application. I honestly don't really remember what it was like. But
Hurry, come on.
I'm sorry. But I do think I think emphasis on who you are is also really important. Just like actually quite important, because in the end, like, as I think everyone has been talking about, like the actual nature of the fellowship might change. It might not go the way it's been going. The only thing that stays consistent, even the organization could not even be consistent. I mean, like, you don't really know what you're getting into until you meet them, really. I mean, I called them a bit, but I think, like, the only thing that is consistent is you. So, like, showing your personal passion and sort of specificity of your passion, and I think that's like the one thing that will definitely carry you through, and sort of your ability to be sort of flexible, I think probably.
I would say choosing something that you're passionate about, because I think genuine interest and wanting to explore a topic is something that's going to motivate you and will really show through your application, but also will just make the fellowship experience like a lot more fruitful. I also think getting ahead of the ball, trying to, start early and start contacting people early. I think that will also just help you to sort of organize all of your things. Like we said, like a lot of times nonprofits have very small staff. I know that at my organization, like when the phone rings, like no one answers the phone. Like that's not really happening. So trying to sort of reach out to people as soon as possible, and discuss, I think, is a piece of advice that I would offer.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything everybody's saying. Something that helped me was to like have like authors and like thinkers related to the general field I was looking at. So I'd been doing some research about that. So like I did reference like a scholar thinking about like Polynesian worldviews, and like it was really helpful to like have that even to this date, because then it's like that's how you like relate it back to your field and like communicate that with other people. And I think that generally helps to have in the application as well. I think for me, like I wrote a lot of emails, but like the organization, like responding to emails is hard. So I think you have to like kind of check the pulse of like, is this somebody who's going to write back to you? Is this somebody who might actually speak to you and be really enthusiastic about that instead? So I think like after a point, like I was just calling people and just having like a spiel ready where I'm like, hey, I'm doing this. I will have the money for it. Do you have space? And just like maybe practice like saying that. Because it can be like scary to like reach out, to a person and just be like, hey, I'm from RISD, do you want me? But what was the other thing? Yeah, I think I also reached to like sometimes like other organizations that are physically around the same space and called their numbers and like asked if they knew people there, and just was really honest about like what I wanted to come there to do. And people generally, like in my experience, were like really positive about the fact that you want to engage. So, yeah.
Yeah, over the years, the fellowships have gone really, really well. But I'm here and our staff is here to talk to the organization or to intercede for you as well if there are issues that should arise. So again, the pairings have been remarkable, I think, over time and have worked really well. But do also know that we're here to support you in this process. Lisa.
I have a tip. Talking about how busy these organizations are, one thing to keep in mind when you get to the offer letter, it's really helpful if you go in prepared to at least write parts of it for them and give them bullets or write sections for them or something, because they're so busy and now you're asking them to take time to write a letter. So just be prepared for that. We can help you with that. We actually have like a little template that can kind of get you started. But no, and it's okay. I know it might seem weird that you're writing the letter for them. They're going to sign it. They're going to agree. They're going to add their own thing. So it's totally legit to do that. But just be prepared for that part of it.
So I hope tonight, for those who are still here and those that had attended, that this workshop gave you a lot of really good insight into what the fellowship is about, how to prepare for it, whether you want to do it this year or we got one more year, so keep that in mind as well. And I know it's a lot of information, but when I hear it again, and I'm right in the midst of it, I so loved and enjoyed working with these five and all the fellows, and it's just a real joy for our office, for Lisa and Scott to work with you and guide you in the application process along with my staff, and I'm so glad you were here tonight. So thank you. Is there one final question or two, and then we'll conclude? We do have one right here.
Well, the length of your internship were 8 weeks or 10 weeks or something, and I guess it is all self-guided. But how much time did you guys allocate for it? Was it the equivalent of a part-time job, full-time job? How much of it was hybrid or on-site? And if it was hybrid, how long were you guys at the physical location if it's not where you're living?
Okay.
It's definitely full-time for me. I was there Monday through Friday, in person, working there at least 4 hours a day, and then coming home and working on my end of the design project for another 4 hours. So it was the only thing I was doing at that point of the summer.
Mine ended up being about 20 hours a week, so it was the equivalent of a part-time.
I was a hybrid situation. I would go in, I would say, maybe 3 days a week on average, sometimes more, sometimes more. But just 3 days on average, and then I would do work from home or at libraries or wherever I wanted to. I don't know. I think it's hard for me to describe because they didn't want me to help them with the regular stuff. It was really just working on the project. So it was really important just to stay consistent in some way or another. Hours would low-key differ a lot, but knowing that I would go into the office at least 3 days a week and just have people there, and then that would be my 9 to 5. Yeah, but it's kind of hard to describe. Just but what wasn't, but it felt it was important to have like some sort of structure, despite it kind of swaying around a lot.
Yeah, mine was about 9 to 10 weeks, I think, that I was there. And I had weekends, but otherwise it was like a full-time situation. Yeah.
My schedule varied quite a bit. There were days when I was like, again, because I was working like on a voyaging canoe, so it's like it really depends on like what that schedule is, and it's like sometimes you're like at the dock at like 10 p.m. and like doing stuff, or you're waking up really early. Sometimes I was working on the weekends because a lot of their programming is for the public that is free on the weekends. So I was like joining them in on that. So sometimes I would have like free time in the week, and then the weekends would just be like packed. And then I also had a trip to Kauai where Quillen was working after Quillen left. So that was like, like I think 4 or 5 straight days. And then I think I had a really intense first month, many hours. And then towards the last 2 weeks, I was on my own because by that point I'd collected enough information and experiences to like start drawing these things out. So then I was just working from home.
And I would note in the application, the expectation is that during the fellowship, it is your primary focus. So you might, again, there might be some side jobs, but the focus is the fellowship. We would highly discourage like doing an internship and the fellowship. So, and because you are getting the 5,000, the expectation is that focus will be on the fellowship for the time frame that you're in it. Okay. Well, let's conclude. And thank you all so much. Good luck. I hope that everyone in the room will consider pursuing it, and we can't wait to see what organizations you come up with, too. Take care. Thank you. And thank you.